Hello friends, you're watching Ruslan Belov's channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine as of January 15th, 2026. A great deal has happened over the past 24 hours, so let's get straight to the point. A very tense and unusual situation is unfolding around Greenland. Over the last day, more and more reports suggest that European countries have begun sending small contingents to Greenland. Symbolic, but still politically meaningful. Norway, according to reports, is sending 1 soldier. France is reportedly sending either 4 or 6, and Germany possibly up to 10. So Europe's presence on the island is extremely limited in numbers. However, even this kind of deployment creates a legal and political precedent, because as far as I can remember, this may be the first time European states have acted together in this way, without direct US involvement or support. They are sending a small contingent and doing it without coordinating with Washington. Donald Trump naturally does not like this at all, and he has already made a number of statements on the matter. In his view, if Greenland does not choose the United States as its main partner, then Russia and China could potentially step in, and that is clearly unacceptable for the US administration. Overall, the situation looks increasingly serious. Judging by the news coming from Europe and by statements from leaders such as Emmanuel Macron, it is becoming clear that Europeans see the risk of losing Greenland as a real threat. More and more, this looks like an early sign of a potential rift inside NATO. We will keep watching how this story develops. By the way, important foreign policy remarks are expected today from the President of the Russian Federation. This was officially announced by Dmitry Peskov, so it is likely that Putin will speak during the day and outline Russia's position on major issues on the global agenda. Most likely, he will address Iran, Venezuela, and of course the situation around Greenland. So we will be watching closely to see what is said and what signals are sent. Now let's move to Ukraine, where a large amount of significant information is also coming in. First, last evening the Ukrainian side published a video that, in my view, is highly important. The footage shows a Russian Geran-type drone in flight. Then there is an impact, and the drone abruptly changes course and begins to fall. At first glance, it looked like the drone might have been hit by a missile, so initially I did not give it too much attention. But after a closer review and a deeper analysis, I came to a different conclusion. It appears the strike was not delivered by a missile and not by a traditional air defense system, but by a Ukrainian interceptor drone, an anti-drone system designed specifically to hunt down and destroy other drones. We know that Ukraine has recently been investing heavily in this type of technology. These are drones whose main mission is to intercept and eliminate enemy UAVs. And in this case, we may be seeing the first official demonstration of such a weapon being used in real combat conditions. And these images were not published by accident. Today there are already reports that the Russian Federation is preparing another large-scale strike. It is said that Tu-95 aircraft are being redeployed from the Ukrainka airbase to airfields closer to Ukraine, toward Engels, and also toward bases in the Murmansk region. Such movements usually indicate preparations for a major operation, and it is very possible that a powerful strike will be launched in the near future, involving hundreds of drones and dozens of missiles. The timing is extremely sensitive. These are the days when the coldest weather is expected across Ukraine, including in Kyiv. There are also reports that after the latest strikes on energy infrastructure in the Kyiv region, local authorities have still not been able to fully restore electricity, heating, and water supply. In addition, Kyiv's CHP-5 and CHP-6 power plants are reportedly operating below full capacity, and most likely they will not return to maximum output anytime soon. And there is an important point here that many people need to understand. Even if parts of the energy system were restored after the strikes a few days ago, it seems that the restoration is not being completed all the way. The reason is simple. Officials clearly understand the risk. If Kyiv is fully connected back to the grid at maximum load, and then Russia launches another massive strike with dozens of missiles and hundreds of drones, the consequences could be catastrophic. That kind of UDAR could become the final one that collapses the system entirely. That is why it feels as though some districts are being intentionally kept at a reduced level, in anticipation of another attack, to avoid severe overloads and voltage spikes. We will see how the situation develops, but there is a strong possibility that the next strike may come after Putin delivers his speech. At the same time, today the US president made an important remark that says a lot about the current political background. According to Trump, he does not see Russia deliberately dragging out the peace settlement process. On the contrary, in his view, it is Ukraine that is currently avoiding a peace agreement and delaying concrete decisions. And today the Russian side essentially supported that interpretation. So we are seeing a certain alignment of positions against the wider backdrop of events involving Iran, Venezuela, Greenland, and Ukraine. That is why I will repeat, there is a high probability that another massive strike may be carried out within the next 1 or 2 days. Now let's move to the line of contact, where Russian forces continue offensive operations. Important news is once again coming in from the Zaporizhia sector. Russian units are actively developing their offensive both in western Zaporizhia and in eastern Zaporizhia. In the western area, a major update has appeared on the maps over the past 24 hours, and these changes are not limited to a single day. This accelerated pace has been visible since around January 10th. By the end of January 11th, the map looked noticeably different, but since then, updates have appeared at a very rapid rate. The situation changed on January 12th, then January 13th, then January 14th, and now January 15th. According to the latest data from multiple mapping services, including neutral and pro-Western sources, Russian units have significantly improved their positions near the settlement of Primorska. Based on these updates, it appears that the front line is being straightened and leveled between Primorsk and a chain of small villages near Novoboykivske. Moreover, some analysts claim that reconnaissance and sabotage groups have already moved farther north, toward settlements such as Rychna and Veselyanka. In other words, the depth of penetration is increasing, and the direction of movement is shifting further north, toward Zaporizhia. Overall, it creates the impression that Ukrainian defenses are being reorganized much farther north, roughly along the line Malokaterynivka, Hrihorivka, Veselyanka, Ulivka, Zaporizhets, while the open fields between these points are being left without dense defensive coverage, according to multiple observers. In the eastern Zaporizhia direction, fighting continues for a bridgehead on the Ukrainian side of the Haichur River. The main events are unfolding along the Priluki-Alano-Kostiantynivka line, and mapping services recorded further updates in this area over the past 24 hours. According to these reports, Russian forces strengthened their position significantly, and several strong defensive points came under the control of the Russian military. The offensive continues, and these changes suggest that roughly 80 to 90% of the bridgehead on the Ukrainian bank of the Haichur River up to the Andriivka-Bratske line is already under Russian control. Further consolidation is underway, along with a build-up of forces for an advance westward toward Orikhiv. Russian sources claim that Ukrainian forces regularly carry out counterattacks toward Huliaipol, as well as along the Zelen-Sviatopetrivka line. Pro-Russian sources say that almost all of these Popitki are being repelled. In some cases, Ukrainian units may briefly reach the western outskirts of Huliaipol, but they are reportedly unable to hold those positions for long. Next, we move to the Dobropilia sector of the front. Here, no major changes have been recorded for several days, and the map has remained largely stable. This may indicate that the Russian army is currently focused on regrouping and preparing for further actions in the Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad area. The situation there is extremely difficult in terms of clearing the terrain. There are countless basements, buildings, minefields, tripwires, and various booby traps. A full clearance of such cities is a long and complex operation. On top of that, infrastructure must be restored and logistics must be organized. That is why it seems unlikely that we will see major activity in this sector until the spring and summer campaign begins. During this time, the Russian side will likely focus on rebuilding military infrastructure, and only later could an advance begin toward the borders of the Dnipropetrovsk and Kharkiv regions. However, there is one exception that stands out. This is the advance from the Sharkov and Sofiivka area toward Druzhkivka. Here, Russian units continue to move forward, and analysts regularly publish updates from this direction. And today, for the first time, reports appeared that Russian forces have entered the settlement of Novopavlivka. For now, this appears to involve reconnaissance and sabotage groups moving into the southern part of the area, scouting the terrain, and possibly preparing a foothold for future consolidation. After that, we move to the Kostiantynivka sector, where the map has changed significantly. Today, it can be said that the entire bridgehead around the perimeter of the Lyman bike reservoir has now been fully updated and clarified. As of the end of January 14th, a large part of this area was still considered a grey zone. But now there are growing reasons to believe that the whole area is under firm Russian control. Most of these conclusions are based on video materials that have appeared recently. One of them shows Ukrainian FPV drones striking forward Russian positions. The footage was geolocated at a specific point, and that is precisely what became the basis for further map adjustments, including areas to the south. Moreover, neutral and pro-Western mappers report that Russian forces are actively advancing in the western part of Kostiantynivka itself, expanding their foothold and gradually increasing the zone of control. At the moment, most pro-Western and pro-Ukrainian mapping services continue to label these territories as grey zones. However, if we sum everything up, then by the end of January 15th, we can speak about a widening of this grey strip along the indicated red line. In practical terms, this concerns the western and southwestern part of Kostiantynivka, and it is important to emphasize that this is not just the outskirts of the city. This is what many refer to as the Kostiantynivka Citadel, the neighborhood with the largest and tallest buildings. According to a number of experts, Russian units have managed to enter this area, and it is likely that they are now in the process of establishing a foothold there. Of course, we are waiting for video evidence that could confirm these reports, and such footage may appear very soon. If this information is confirmed, and if Russian forces действительно manage to hold the citadel area, then the risk for the Ukrainian side becomes much higher. There is a strong chance that Ukrainian units operating from the Berestov direction will begin an urgent regrouping to the north in order to avoid a potential encirclement. Next, we move to the Sloviansk-Siversk sector of the front, where changes are also being recorded on the maps. Russian units here are advancing gradually and steadily toward Mykolaiivka and the Sloviansk power plant, and these are exactly the adjustments noted over the past 24 hours. The offensive in this area is complicated by the nature of the terrain. There are very few settlements here. Between the Siversky Donetsk Canal and the town of Siversk itself, there are almost no large villages, mostly forests, tree lines, and open fields. Advancing across such terrain is difficult, especially during an open field offensive. Moreover, the deeper Russian units push into these exposed areas, the greater the distance becomes from the settlements where they have already managed to consolidate their positions and where at least some infrastructure exists. At the same time, they are moving closer to locations such as Oleksandrivka and Mykolaiivka, where the Ukrainian side has already established positions and bases for FPV drone operators. That is why advancing under these conditions is extremely challenging. Despite all these challenges, Russian forces are still making progress. Over the past few days, the frontline map has continued to shift, with the fastest movement recorded southeast of Sloviansk, around Nikiforivka, Fedorivka Druha, Bondan, and just south of Reznikivka. This is largely open terrain, and that's exactly where the most active fighting and forward pressure are currently taking place. One of the key updates here is the push in the Bondan-Dibrova-Ozern area. Ukrainian sources released geolocated footage showing FPV drones striking Russian forward positions north of the Siversky Donetsk River. The video shows multiple explosive drops hitting specific locations, and these frames have been used to update the map from the Yampil area further toward that contact line. There are also 2 additional geolocated clips from the Dibrova direction, showing a similar pattern, FPV strikes and artillery fire hitting Russian frontline positions. Based on this set of evidence, analysts increasingly believe that Dibrova has likely fallen under Russian control, and that Ozern has also been taken. If that's the case, an official confirmation from the Russian Ministry of Defense could follow soon. Moving on to the Lyman sector, there is no clear large-scale offensive underway right now. Instead, Russia appears to be focusing on logistics, targeting crossings, supply routes, and any attempt to move equipment and reinforcements across the river network. One recent video shows a crossing near the settlement of Mayaki. Once it was spotted, it was hit immediately. The author claims the strike was carried out using the Tornado S system, and the result was devastating. The crossing was effectively wiped out. And this was not an isolated incident. Since early January, multiple strikes on crossings in this area have been recorded. Another video also stands out. It shows a large amount of engineering equipment moved into the Sloviansk sector, apparently to build embankment-style crossings. In one episode, reconnaissance identifies a newly built earth-fill crossing linking the northern and southern banks of the Siversky Donetsk, and the moment it is detected, strikes begin hitting the equipment. At least 2 crossings have been reliably located and destroyed, although the real number is likely higher. Not everything reaches open sources, and not every location can be confirmed publicly. But the overall picture is clear. Russia is concentrating heavily on cutting supply lines and controlling movement across the river. Now to the Kupansk direction, where we see a very similar approach. Russian forces are focusing on logistics and crossings here as well. Footage from yesterday shows a crossing discovered near Kupansk Uzlovyi. The video looks recent. Snow is clearly visible on the ground, so we're definitely looking at January conditions. The moment the crossing was detected, it was struck. Today, more footage appeared further south near Osinov. The same pattern repeats. The crossing is restored, and it gets hit again almost immediately. All of this suggests that Russia is once again moving toward what could be described as a 5th phase of fighting for Kupiansk. And in terms of logic and direction, it closely resembles earlier attempts. An advance from the north, from the Oskil River area, from the Kondrashivka and Holubivka directions, moving steadily from north to south. The key feature remains the same: strict control over crossings, using drones, air power, and precision strikes to keep Ukrainian logistics under constant pressure. Next, we move to the Vovchansk sector. New reports indicate that Russian units have expanded their presence near Prilipka and Simonivka. These updates are being reflected not only by neutral mapping sources, but also in daily statements from Russia's Sever troop grouping. Finally, looking at the northern directions, map updates have been reported near the settlement of Komarivka. Russia's Ministry of Defense reported progress there yesterday, and today neutral sources have also adjusted the map in that area. However, it is still too early to say what exactly this development means. It could be an early sign of a broader push in the northeast, toward the Chernihiv and Sumy regions. Or it could simply be a limited reconnaissance action, followed by a media-driven update. At this stage, there has been no additional material confirming a larger operation, so the situation remains unclear. That's all for now, friends. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and I'll see you in the next update.